I've compiled 37 cases of some of the most disturbing moments ever caught on surveillance cameras. We'll start with footage that's unsettling but not the kind that'll keep you up at night. But from there, it only gets worse. By the end, we'll be deep into cases that are genuinely disturbing. Let's get into it. This is the horrifying CCTV footage iceberg. In early 2023, a 45-year-old woman was standing in the checkout queue at a supermarket in central Brazil, recording a voice message on her phone. Without any warning, a 36-year-old man named Rogério Santos de Silva stepped out of the line, walked over, grabbed an empty metal shopping cart weighing about 25 kilograms, lifted it above his head, and hurled it down onto her temple. She dropped, unconscious before she even hit the floor. CCTV caught the whole thing. Other shoppers ran over to help, and she was eventually treated by paramedics and released. She later said she had no idea who the man was and hadn't exchanged a single word with him. Rogério told police she'd called him a slur, and that he acted, quote, to serve as a lesson. He was initially released, but what most reports leave out is his criminal history. He had at least 7 prior legal proceedings on his file, including a 2017 arrest for attempted femicide and a 2021 domestic violence conviction. In April 2023, a court issued a preventative detention order, and he was rearrested and charged with attempted murder with aggravating factors. At about 7:40 a.m. on a Friday morning in May 2017, a 33-year-old woman was crossing Putney Bridge in southwest London. A jogger ran past her and, without breaking stride, shoved her off the pavement and directly into the road. She landed right in front of a double-decker bus. Thankfully, the driver, Oliver Salbris, reacted swiftly and swerved into the adjacent lane, missing her by only a few inches. She was heard screaming, "Why me?" 15 minutes later, the same jogger came back across the same bridge, going the opposite direction. The woman tried to confront him, but he completely ignored her and kept running. The fact that he came back the same way suggests he may have been running an out-and-back route, possibly a tourist, which could explain why he was never found. The bus dashcam gave police a clear look at the man, a white male in his early 30s with brown eyes and short brown hair. The case blew up in the press, and within months, police arrested a 41-year-old American investment banker named Eric Belquist at his Chelsea home. Problem was, his lawyers proved he was in the United States at the time. The Met Police hadn't even checked whether he was in the country before making the arrest. Belquist ended up needing bodyguards from ex-special forces after getting death threats online. A second man was arrested in October and also cleared. In total, police examined over 50 people of interest, arrested 3 men, and charged none of them. The case was closed in June 2018, and the man who nearly killed a stranger for no apparent reason has never been identified. Chang Pao-shi was a 63-year-old Taiwanese tourist from Kaohsiung who had arrived in Malaysia on May 31, 2025. On the evening of June 3rd, at 5:54 p.m, during rush hour, he was walking alone on the elevated platform at the Pusat Bandar Puchong LRT station in Selangor along the Sri Petaling line. CCTV on the platform captured him approaching the edge. He appeared unaware of how close he was to the tracks, and he fell. An oncoming train struck him before anyone could intervene. The driver didn't see him fall. Emergency crews from the Subang Jaya fire station found him unconscious beneath the carriage and confirmed he was dead at the scene. His body was sent to Sultan Idris Shah Hospital for post-mortem. The Selangor police chief confirmed there were no criminal elements, and the CCTV showed he fell due to his own actions. The case was classified as a sudden death. The station had no platform screen doors, which are barriers between the waiting area and the tracks that are standard on Malaysia's newer MRT stations, but absent from older LRT stations like this one. It wasn't even the first death there. A man had died the exact same way at the same Puchong station back in 2018, and just 4 months earlier, in February 2025, a visually impaired man lost his balance and was struck by a train at the Titiwangsa LRT station in Kuala Lumpur. After Chang's death, Transport Minister Anthony Loki ordered platform screen doors installed at all LRT stations, though no timeline was given. In November 2022, a 55-year-old former professional truck driver, identified by the surname Zhan, was driving his second-hand Tesla Model Y to his cement store in Chaozhou, southern China. He bought the car used from a friend about a year earlier, and it's had roughly 12,000 miles on it. He tried to park outside the shop, and according to him, the brake pedal suddenly went hard, and the car took off on its own. It accelerated over a stretch of about 1.6 miles, reportedly reaching a top speed of 123 miles per hour. Multiple surveillance cameras along the route captured the entire run. First, it swerved past a motorcycle, then hit another one going the same direction, killing the rider. The Tesla kept going. It hit a bicycle, a cargo tricycle, and a dumpster truck before striking a high school girl on her bicycle. She didn't survive, and 3 more people were seriously injured, including Jean himself. Jean insisted the brakes failed, and his family initially blamed Tesla's autopilot software, but Tesla's data told a different story. The car's event data recorder showed the accelerator pedal was pressed to 100% throughout the entire incident, and no braking input was detected at any point. The brake lights were visibly off in every frame of the CCTV footage, and autopilot was confirmed to be disengaged. Jean had tapped the park button 4 times during the run, but the button requires a sustained hold to function as an emergency brake, and he never held it long enough, and blood tests confirmed he was sober. In March 2023, a court-appointed forensic agency concluded the crash was caused by driver error, and Tesla was cleared of liability. Tesla later sued a Chinese vlogger, who claimed otherwise, and won. On July 19, 2018, 28-year-old Marquise McLaughlin arrived at a Circle A food store in Clearwater, Florida. He went inside with his 5-year-old son to get snacks. His girlfriend stayed in their car with 2 other children. She'd parked in a handicapped spot by the building. Michael Drejka pulled into the lot and began circling the car and looking for a permit, and he started a verbal fight with McLaughlin's girlfriend. A witness saw the argument and went into the store to tell McLaughlin. CCTV shows him walking out of the door, and he walked straight up to Drejka and shoved him. Drejka fell backward off a wheelchair ramp and hit the asphalt, and sat on the ground for a few seconds. Then he pulled a .40 caliber handgun. McLaughlin immediately saw the weapon and started backing up towards his car. He was turning his body away when Drejka fired. The bullet went into the left side of his chest and tore through his heart. McLaughlin ran back into the store and fell onto the floor in front of his son and died. The entire sequence took around 5 seconds. Drejka told police he was acting in self-defense, and the sheriff didn't arrest him at first. He cited the Florida Stand Your Ground law, but the footage showed that McLaughlin was not moving forward, and Drejka was found to have a history of these fights. He had threatened a truck driver in that same spot months before. He also had 2 past cases where he pointed guns at people during traffic disputes. Prosecutors eventually brought charges, and the jury watched the video and did not believe Drejka was in danger. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Celia Ward was 77 years old, a retired midwife and grandmother who'd been married for 53 years to a retired RAF pilot. She was riding her bicycle along a pavement in Huntington, Cambridgeshire, on a path that ran alongside a 30-mile-per-hour road. She cycled on pavements because she had hearing difficulties. Coming toward her on foot was 46-year-old Oriole Gray. As they crossed paths, Gray screamed, "Get off the fucking pavement," and waved her arm aggressively. Celia swerved to avoid her, lost control of the bicycle, and fell directly into the road. A car driven by a young mother with her 2-year-old daughter in the back seat hit Celia instantly. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Gray didn't stop to check on her. She just carried on walking to Sainsbury's to do her shopping. Gray had been born with brain damage causing cerebral palsy. As a child, she'd undergone a partial hemispherectomy, the removal of part of her brain's left hemisphere. She was partially blind, with no peripheral vision on her right side. She was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 3 years in March 2023, but the Court of Appeal overturned the conviction entirely in May 2024, ruling there was no evidence Gray made any physical contact with Ward. The prosecution's request for retrial was denied. Whether the pavement was even a legally shared path was, according to the court, never clearly established, but Celia Ward is still dead, and no one is serving time for it. At 2:18 in the morning on November 29, 2020, a 911 call came in reporting gunshots at the Shady Oaks apartment complex in Albert Lee, Minnesota. Officer Cody Needham was dispatched. When he pulled up, he was immediately shot through the side window of his squad car. His bulletproof vest saved his life. The standoff lasted 8 hours and was captured across multiple cameras, including squad car dash cams, body cams, and footage from a police drone before the shooter knocked it out of the sky. The shooter fired roughly 80 to 90 rounds total, hitting neighbors leaving the building, a passing motorist through his car door, and the drone itself. Officers couldn't get into the building because they didn't have a key until a woman who escaped handed hers to them before hiding in her car. 3 SWAT teams responded. At dawn, they spotted the shooter on the 3rd floor, but negotiations failed. At 9 a.m., tear gas was deployed, and when the shooter moved to the window, a State Patrol sniper fired from 72 yards away. The bullet shattered on the window glass, but a fragment struck the shooter between the eyes, injuring but not killing him, and he surrendered. He was 21-year-old Devin Wayland. It turns out he was the one who made the 911 call. He'd accidentally discharged a firearm in his apartment and, fearing police would confiscate his guns, called in a fake report to law and officer. He told investigators he wanted to die, but didn't believe in doing it himself, so he opened fire hoping they'd shoot back and kill him. The jury deliberated for 2.5 hours, 3 counts of first-degree attempted murder and 3 counts of second-degree assault. Devin Wayland was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Of the 5 Albert Lee officers who responded that night, only 2 still remain with the department, with the other 3 clearly not wanting to go through another experience like that. The surveillance cameras outside the Conway Police Department in Conway, Arkansas, captured everything that happened on July 15, 2010. At around 1:15 in the afternoon, a black Chevrolet Impala driven by 21-year-old Cortez Waller pulled into the parking lot. Seconds later, a second vehicle pulled up right alongside it. Inside that car were 32-year-old Christopher Childress, his fiancée Deronda Carter, and their 3 children, aged 2, 4, and 7. The backstory was a love triangle. Childress and Carter had been together 8 years, but Carter had started an affair with Waller, a former co-worker. After the affair came out, Childress told Carter he'd stay if she told him the full truth. On that day, the 2 men crossed paths in Conway, and a vehicle chase developed through the streets, ending when Waller turned into the police station parking lot. The CCTV showed Carter trying to physically hold Childress back inside the car. He broke free, jumped out, and sprinted directly at Waller, who had also stepped out of his vehicle. Waller pulled a .45 caliber handgun and fired 2 to 3 rounds right into Childress's torso. Childress dropped just short of reaching him. His 3 children were feet away in the car. Waller walked calmly into the police station and turned himself in. Childress was pronounced dead at the hospital. Carter later said through tears that she tried to tell him she loved him, but he couldn't hear her. Waller was charged with first-degree murder, later reduced to second-degree. His defense lawyer argued self-defense, using the same CCTV footage that the prosecution had expected would guarantee a conviction. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted Waller on all counts. Childress' mother asked how a man could be gunned down in front of his children, and the shooter walked free. The lead prosecutor resigned after the verdict. On the morning of May 4, 2025, a family was at Terminal 1 of Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila, seeing off their father, an overseas Filipino worker heading to the Czech Republic. Dan Mark Masongsong had entered the terminal about 15 minutes earlier. His 4-year-old daughter Malia, her mother Cynthia, and her grandmother Editha were still outside on the curbside walkway. A black Ford Everest SUV parked diagonally at the departure drop-off zone suddenly accelerated forward. Airport CCTV captured the vehicle smashing through the metal bollard barriers, which dislodged with almost no resistance, before plowing into the pedestrians on the walkway and slamming into the terminal's glass wall. Malia was found pinned under the SUV. She died of blunt force trauma. A 29-year-old man named Derek Faustino, who just stepped out of a company van to catch a flight to Dubai, was also killed. The driver, 47-year-old Leo Gonzalez, a hardware delivery driver from Batangas, claimed a sedan had suddenly passed in front of his SUV, causing him to panic and hit the gas instead of the brake. But the CCTV showed no sedan passing in front of his vehicle. His alcohol and drug tests came back clean. He was charged with reckless imprudence, resulting in double homicide, and released on a bail of roughly $1,750. Malia's mother, Cynthia, woke up in the hospital after surgery for internal bleeding in her spleen. She didn't know her daughter was dead. The bullets that were supposed to stop this kind of thing had cost 8 million pesos to install across all 4 terminals. Engineers later determined they hadn't been buried deep enough to actually stop a vehicle. Ana Beatriz Piera Alves was 27 years old, a mother of an 8-year-old son, and known online as Ana Polly. She made adult content on OnlyFans and had built a following in Brazil. On January 23, 2025, she checked into the Mont Blanc Apart Hotel in Nova Ikaku with 2 male content creators and a videographer to film a paid shoot. Hotel CCTV tracked the group leaving and returning roughly 40 minutes before the fall. When they came back, a hotel employee noted that Alves appeared heavily intoxicated. Inside the 8th floor room, The group consumed drugs and alcohol. Shortly after, Alves went over the balcony railing and fell to the ground floor courtyard. She was dead on impact. The 3 men present gave conflicting accounts of what's happened in the room, which initially raised suspicion. Police from the homicide division pulled the hotel CCTV, seized Alves' phone, and questioned staff. By early February, investigators concluded she'd slipped while climbing onto the railing under the influence of the substances she'd taken minutes earlier. The death was ruled accidental, and no charges were filed. Her boyfriend, who wasn't at the hotel, posted publicly that if anyone was to blame, they'd be found. Friends said she'd faced constant pressure from subscribers to produce increasingly extreme content. Surveillance cameras on Progress Drive in Strongsville, Ohio, captured a Toyota Camry turning in smoothly at 5:34 a.m. on July 31st, 2022. 1 minute later, a second camera caught the same car doing over 100 miles per hour before slamming into the Pigco building, a large brick industrial structure. Inside the car was 17-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla, her boyfriend of 4 years, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and his 19-year-old friend, Davian Flanagan. Weeks earlier, Mackenzie had screamed, "I'm going to wreck this car right now," during a fight with Dominic, while a family friend sat in the back seat. GPS data showed she visited the exact same industrial area 3 days before the crash, likely scouting the location. The car's computer recorded 0 braking input. A fuzzy Prada slipper was found jammed against the accelerator pedal. Dominic died at the scene. Davian was rushed to the hospital but didn't make it. Mackenzie survived with minor injuries. From her hospital bed, she posted TikTok videos. On Halloween, she posted photos of Russo and Flanagan dressed as corpses. The judge called her, quote, "literal hell on wheels," and convicted her on 12 counts, including 4 counts of murder. She got 2 concurrent life sentences with parole eligibility after 15 years, putting her first hearing in 2038. Cristina Ortiz Lozano was a 28-year-old Spanish worker for the Norwegian cruise line out of Southampton. On a Saturday night in September 2019, she was out on her first Tinder date with a man named Vicente Brescobiosca. CCTV caught them together at Sprinkles Ice Cream Parlour, then the Giddy Bridge pub on London Road. What they didn't know was that Christina's ex-boyfriend, 29-year-old Abdelaziz Orzat, was following them, hiding in the shadows. Christina had moved to the UK from Spain with Abdelaziz in 2018, after being together since school. 12 years in total. She ended it in August 2019, and he didn't take it well. At one point during the date, Orzat actually walked into the pub. Christina looked terrified and immediately asked to leave. He was due to be sentenced for criminal damage and malicious communications against her 4 days later. He was on bail conditions not to contact her. That night, CCTV caught him trailing behind Christina and her date as they walked toward her flat on Spear Road. When they arrived, he was already standing outside holding flowers. Christina went inside and he followed her in while her date stayed outside. When Vicente heard screaming, he kicked down the front door and found Orzat on top of Christina on the kitchen floor, one hand on her throat, knife in the other. Orzat shut the kitchen door and continued stabbing her 23 times in the neck, chest, and abdomen. She died right there. Orzat was found in the garden with self-inflicted wounds, but he survived. In March 2021, he was sentenced to life with a minimum of 19 years in prison. Lee Pomeroy was an IT consultant from Guildford. On January 4, 2019, the day before his 52nd birthday, he boarded the 1:01 p.m. train from London Road Station with his 14-year-old son for a day out in London. At the next stop, 36-year-old Darren Pensill got on, and within minutes, he got into an argument with Lee over a blocked dial. It lasted a few seconds before Pensill walked to another carriage, but Lee followed him, leaving his son behind. In the next carriage, the argument started again, and 25 seconds later, Pensill pulled out a knife and stabbed Lee 18 times in what was later called a quick and frenzied attack that severed his carotid artery. The entire thing was captured on the train's CCTV, and when the footage was played in court, jurors watched what they initially thought was 2 men trading punches. They were half right. Lee was punching back in self-defense, but Pensill wasn't punching at all, he was stabbing. Pensill had 14 previous convictions for 19 offences, including stabbing a flatmate in the neck in 2010, and had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He'd seen a psychiatrist the day before the murder, and had been assessed as posing no risk. He got off at the next stop, where his girlfriend Chelsea Mitchell picked him up, drove him home, and helped him shave his beard and alter his appearance. She was later convicted of assisting an offender and got 28 months in prison. Lee's teenage son sat alone in the carriage with his father's body. While paramedics arrived at Horsley Station, Lee was pronounced dead at the scene. Pensill was sentenced to life with a minimum of 28 years. His barrister made no submissions in mitigation, out of respect for the family. CCTV from a wedding hall in Kurtalan, southeastern Turkey, captured 19-year-old Adnan Pegos dancing the halay, a traditional Turkish folk line dance, at his family's wedding on the evening of June 6, 2025. Behind him in the dancing line, another 19-year-old named Aziz Hazma was watching him closely, repeatedly using his phone camera to zoom in on Adnan as he danced. The two had been neighbours until a couple of years earlier. In 2021, they got into an argument while playing PUBG together. Adnan beat Aziz in a match, insults were exchanged, and then they ran into each other on the street. Aziz hit Adnan with a stone, breaking his nose and splitting his eyebrow. Adnan punched him back. Both families intervened, and the matter was supposedly settled, but Aziz never let it go. He nursed the grudge for 4 years. About 2 months before the wedding, he reportedly started preparing, obtaining an unlicensed semi-automatic pistol, and practicing at a shooting range. The wedding hall CCTV captured Asma positioning himself directly behind Adnan in the halay line, then inserting the magazine into his pistol while standing inches from his target's back. He opened fire at point-blank range. Adnan tried to run, but collapsed. Asma kept shooting even after he fell. He shot Adnan 16 times. 3 other wedding guests were hit by stray rounds. Asma pointed the gun at bystanders to stop anyone from intervening, then fled to a nearby indoor football field where he called police and surrendered. He told the court he'd only bought the gun to fire into the air and that a bullet had ricocheted, but the CCTV dismantled every part of his story. In December 2025, he was sentenced to aggravated life imprisonment, the maximum penalty in Turkish law, with no reductions. Adnan's mother told the court she looked into Asma's eyes and saw no remorse at all. His father publicly asked that the killing not become a blood feud. At 3:44 in the morning on August 1, 1995 in Cincinnati, Ohio, 44-year-old Charles Cole was at his house in the South Fairmont neighborhood. His neighbor was 24-year-old Charles Kevin Blankenship. The two men had been in a feud for a long time. Cole claimed that Blankenship was a neighborhood bully who wouldn't leave him alone. Cole had recently installed a home security camera on his front porch to watch the property. On that Tuesday morning, Blankenship walked up the steps and onto Cole's porch. The camera was recording the entire time. As Blankenship reached the top, Cole pulled a 9mm handgun from his back pocket. He fired 4 shots into Blankenship at close range. Blankenship collapsed on the porch and began screaming in pain. He lay there on the wooden boards while he bled to death. The audio from the security camera is what made the footage famous. Cole did not show any fear. He stood over Blankenship as his life was ending, and Cole asked him if he wanted some more. He then asked if he had had enough. Cole did not try to call for an ambulance. He stayed on the porch while Blankenship died. During his trial in November 1995, Cole's lawyer argued that his client had simply snapped after years of harassment. He said Cole was terrified when Blankenship charged onto his land. Prosecutors argued that the camera proved it was a calculated murder. They pointed to the cold comments Cole made as his victim died. The jury found Cole guilty of aggravated murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 18 years. But even with that sentence, Cole was released on November 3, 2004, serving less than 9 years for the murder. On March 27, 1993, a 61-year-old convenience store clerk named Pete Schrum was working at the counter at the Diamond Shamrock gas station in Mesquite, Texas. He was a former Army sergeant who served in Korea and was only months away from retirement. At about 1:20 p.m., he was helping a regular customer who realized she didn't have enough money and went to her car to get her purse. While the station was empty, 22-year-old Wayne Hampton walked in and started a conversation with Schrum to distract him. His 18-year-old uncle, Anthony Bernard Hampton, moved in from the side with a handgun. Anthony ordered Schrum to open the cash register. Schrum followed every instruction. He opened the drawer and stood back while the men looked inside. The register only had $18 in it. Anthony pointed the gun at Schrum and fired 3 times at point-blank range. The bullet hit Schrum in the abdomen, and he fell behind the counter. The two men took the money and a dispenser full of lottery tickets before running toward the door. As they were leaving, they saw the other customer returning from her car. Anthony shot at her twice, hitting her in the shoulder. She survived the injury. 2 security cameras inside the store recorded the entire event. Anthony didn't know the cameras were there. He had actually been in the store 3 hours before the murder to make a normal transaction. When the police released the CCTV footage to local television stations, a viewer recognized Anthony. They worked together at a trampoline factory in Garland. Police interviewed relatives and arrested both men within days. Anthony confessed that he shot Shrum because he was frustrated by how little money there was in the drawer. Both men were convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. Christina Rarick was 56 and her husband Andrew was 59. They lived on Hidden Lake Trail in Georgetown, Ontario, a quiet residential street in a small town. Andrew was an engineering executive at the Canadian Boilermaker Society. On the evening of February 16, 2021, a neighbor's surveillance camera captured Christina's black sedan pulling into the garage just before 6:30 p.m. As the car disappeared inside, a figure emerged from the side of the house and walked in behind it. Christina got out of the car and headed towards the house. The garage door began to close, and the last thing the camera recorded was the figure standing beside the passenger door as the door shut behind them both. The figure was 27-year-old Harrison Brown from Mississauga, who had a business relationship with Christina. He'd been lying in wait. Once that garage door closed, he stabbed Christina to death, then went after Andrew, stabbing him multiple times. Brown stayed inside the house for roughly 11 hours. Then, just before dawn, he set the place on fire. At 5:35 a.m., emergency services responded to reports of an explosion. Firefighters found the home fully engulfed and pulled both bodies from the wreckage. The fire had been set to destroy evidence, but the neighbor's camera had already captured everything that mattered. Police also put out a public appeal for anyone who'd seen a white mid-sized SUV in the area between 4:30 and 6 a.m. 5 weeks later, on March 26th, Brown was arrested without incident. Police made a point of telling the community that this wasn't random. As part of a plea deal, he was charged with first-degree murder for Christina and second-degree for Andrew, suggesting he planned to kill her specifically, but that Andrew's death was opportunistic. In December 2023, he got life with no parole eligibility for 25 years. On the evening of June 7, 2017, 24-year-old Courtney Lake left her home in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. She was a single mother with a young son named Oliver, and in 2013, she'd made local history as the first single mother to enter the Miss Newfoundland and Labrador pageant. At 7:54 p.m., dashcam footage from Migna Avenue captured her walking along the road when a black GMC Sierra pickup truck with a brown and camouflage deer head decal pulled up beside her. She got in. The truck made an aggressive U-turn and drove away, and this footage was the last time Courtney was ever seen alive. The driver was her ex-boyfriend Philip Smith, a 25-year-old Army reservist. That same day, just hours earlier, Smith had appeared in court and pleaded guilty to assaulting Courtney, distributing her intimate images, and breaching her recognizance. She reportedly agreed to go with him to retrieve Christmas ornaments she left at his home. Smith later admitted to police he picked Courtney up that night, but never said where they went. Without a body, no charges were filed. On November 1st, 2017, Smith was found dead near Bellevue Beach. He left no note. Courtney's body has never been found, and the case remains open. Her mother, Lisa Lake, has spoken publicly about a devastating irony. She once saved Smith's life by interviewing him when he called threatening to kill himself. She says she'll never stop regretting that phone call. Meta Price Valentine was a 41-year-old church secretary and choir director in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and a mother of 3. In late October 2014, her friends and family reported her missing after she'd been acting strangely. When she called her mother at 10:30 p.m., she spoke in riddles and sounded confused. Around 5:30 p.m. that evening, CCTV at her apartment complex in Sycamore Park captured her walking toward her building. She paused, appeared to stare at a vehicle, then started running. Seconds later, a man got out of the car and ran after her. That was the last time Meta was ever seen. Police identified the man as Reginald McDowell, a 44-year-old father of free and her on-again off-again boyfriend since high school. Back in 1999, when Meta was dating another man, McDowell kidnapped them both, bound and gagged them, pistol-whipped them, and put them in a car trunk. He got 15 years, but only served around 10. After his release in 2011, he got back together with Meta. She broke up with him on October 11, 2014, 17 days before she vanished. McDowell cooperated with investigators at first, then cut off all communication. In March 2018, warrants were issued for his arrest on first-degree murder and first-degree kidnappings. He's believed to have fled to New York. As of now, he has never been arrested, and Meta's body has never been found. Grace Millane was 21 years old and from Wickford, Essex, and she'd recently graduated from the University of Lincoln and was 6 weeks into a gap year backpacking trip. She'd already been through South America before arriving in Auckland, New Zealand on November 20th, 2018. She matched with 26-year-old Jessie Kempson on Tinder, and they agreed to meet outside the Sky City complex. She took a selfie under a Christmas tree and sent it to her family. That was the last they heard from her. The day went well on the surface. They went to a burger bar, a Mexican cafe, and another bar near the City Life Hotel. CCTV caught them walking into the hotel elevator at 9:40 p.m, heading to Kempson's room. That's the last time Grace was seen alive. The next morning, December 2nd, was her 22nd birthday, and by then, she was already dead. Kempson took intimate photographs of her body. He searched online for body disposal methods. Then he went out and bought a large suitcase, cleaning supplies, and rented a car. That afternoon, while Grace's body was still in his room, he went on another Tinder date with a different woman. That evening, he bought carpet cleaners and rented a rug cleaning machine, and at 9:26 p.m, he wheeled 2 suitcases to the rental car. One of them contained Grace. The next morning, he drove to a hardware store, bought a shovel, and buried her in a shallow grave in the Waitakere Ranges west of Auckland. After that, he took his clothes to the dry cleaners and washed the rental car. Grace's family got worried when she didn't contact them on her birthday. Police reviewed the CCTV and arrested Kempson at the hotel on December 8th. He claimed it was rough consensual sex gone wrong. The jury didn't believe him. What most coverage leaves out is that after his murder conviction, Kempson faced 2 more trials and was convicted of sexually violating another British tourist he'd met on Tinder before Grace, and of sexual violation, threatening to kill, and assault against a former partner. Over a dozen women came forward after his arrest. Grace's case directly influenced the UK's Domestic Abuse Act of 2021, which ended the rough sex defence Kempson had tried to use. He got life with a minimum of 17 years. Landy Paraga was a 23-year-old model and influencer in Ecuador. On April 28, 2024, she went to a wedding in Quevedo and stopped for lunch at a restaurant in a shopping mall. At 11:30 a.m, she took a photo of her plate and posted it to her Instagram story, and the people who wanted her dead were actually watching her account. This post gave them her exact location. CCTV cameras in the restaurant captured what happened. Landy was standing by her table talking to a man when 2 men in baseball caps entered through the front doors. They didn't bother looking at the other customers. One gunman walked straight to Landy. He pulled a handgun and fired at her head and torso, and she collapsed onto the floor immediately. The gunman fired again while she was on the ground. The 2 men then ran out to the restaurant and got into waiting cars. Landy died on the spot. The man she was talking to wasn't harmed. Police found that her name was part of the Metastasis investigation. This was a massive probe into cartels and state corruption. Evidence shows she had a relationship with Leandro Norero. He was a drug lord known as the Boss. He was killed in a prison riot in 2022, and forensic items found bank records showing Norero had sent her money. He sent $2,000 in June and $4,000 in July. These transfers happened while he was running his empire from a cell. Investigators think Landy was killed because she knew about these transactions. The cartel wanted to kill a witness. Norero's widow is also a suspect. The footage shows the hitmen were inside and out in under 10 seconds. Harshandeep Singh Antal was a 20-year-old Indian international student. He'd come to Canada in mid-2023 on a student visa to study business administration at Northwest College in Edmonton. He dreamed of becoming an Edmonton police officer and took a security guard job at an apartment complex on 107 Avenue in the central McDougall neighborhood to build experience. He'd been in the country for 18 months, and it was his 3rd day on the job. He was patrolling alone and unarmed in December 2024. At about 1:28 a.m, 30-year-old Lazarus Evan Chase Francis Rain approached him in a stairwell and struck him in the head with the barrel of a sawed-off shotgun. Rain's partner, 30-year-old Judith May Saltu shoved him down the stairs, and as Harshandeep fell, Rain shot him in the back. The attack was captured on the building's security cameras. Police found him unresponsive and he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The building itself had a documented history of violence that made the whole thing feel inevitable. Just 2 weeks earlier, a man had been shot at the same complex, and city records showed 60 inspections over 5 years, 25 citations, and 9 separate orders from Alberta Health Services. Rain alone had racked up at least 80 criminal charges and 17 convictions since 2012, including a prior incident where he was caught with a sawed-off shotgun and methamphetamine during a high-speed police chase. Saltu had been convicted at least 8 times, including 5 years for aggravated assault. Both pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. A GoFundMe for Harshandeep's family raised over 122,000 Canadian dollars in less than 24 hours. The city shut down the apartment complex weeks later, evicting roughly 60 residents, including 25 children, and his case sparked nationwide calls for security guard safety reform across Canada.
Gunman! Get the fucking phone right now, then! Get the fucking phone! Fuck, man, get the fucking phone right now! You okay? Get the fucking phone right now! I'm going. Fucking get the fucking phone right now! Get the fucking phone right now! Get the fucking phone, man! You're blowing the You're blowing the
CCTV from July 13, 2020 captured 2 friends, 24-year-old Paulios Petrosawanis, a Lithuanian man everyone called Polo, and 20-year-old Sean Bull, laughing together in the hallway of a block of flats in Heathtown, Wolverhampton. On the footage, the 2 of them looked like they're having a great day. They went to a convenience store, bought snacks, chatted casually, and headed back to a flat on Cheverell Rise, where Paulios' girlfriend lived. What the CCTV didn't show was that Bull had been carrying a concealed Rambo-style hunting knife on him the entire time they were together. Inside the flat around 5:20 p.m, an argument broke out after Paulios took a phone call. Whatever was said, Bull pulled the knife and stabbed Paulios once in the chest. That single wound went through his diaphragm, his liver, and the protective sac around his heart before exiting through his back. It completely severed one of his coronary arteries. Paulios died on the floor of his girlfriend's flat within seconds. Bull walked out of the building looking completely calm. CCTV picked him up again on the streets of Wolverhampton, and nothing about his body language suggested he'd killed someone. He ditched the knife, called a taxi, and took himself to Shrewsbury. He was arrested 2 days later with a man bag that still had the victim's blood on it. When questioned, his story kept changing. First he said he blacked out from an epileptic fit, then he said they'd been sparring with knives and it was an accident. The weapon itself wasn't found for months, eventually turning up buried in a pile of dirt wedged between a fence and a wall on Wensfield Road. In January 2022, Bull was sentenced to life with a minimum of 20 years at what was reportedly the first murder trial ever held at Stoke-on-Trent Crown Court. School security cameras in Conyers, Georgia captured 16-year-old twin sisters Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead walking into their high school on the morning of January 13, 2010. The timestamp read after 10 a.m. Separate CCTV from a nearby gas station showed them there at 10 past 10. Both of these timestamps mattered because the twins had told police they'd been at school since 8:15 that morning, and their mother had been found dead in the bathtub of their home. Their mother, 34-year-old Jarmeka Whitehead, aka Nikki, was a licensed beautician who'd recently enrolled at Boulder College to study fashion design. Just 8 days earlier, the courts had granted custody of the twins over their objections, ordering a 2-week trial period. In that single week, Nikki called police 3 times about their behavior. That afternoon, the twins came home and told a passing deputy they'd found their mother dead in the bathtub. She'd been beaten, bitten, cut, and stabbed, and her spinal cord was nearly severed. At first, police treated the girls as victims. They were honor roll students involved in Girl Scouts and ROTC, but detectives noticed they were fully covered up and wearing gloves. When asked to remove them, both had fresh cuts and bite marks on their hands. One said she bit herself when stressed and demonstrated it for the detectives. They were released while police investigated. After the CCTV destroyed their alibi, and after being recorded in the back of a police car showing no remorse and reportedly laughing, both were arrested. For nearly 4 years, they denied everything. Then Tasmia cracked. In her taped confession, she described a fight that broke out when they woke late for school. They hit their mother with a vase, bit her, and stabbed her. Their mother was still alive when they dragged her to the bathtub. She spoke, saying that she hated them and that they were going to jail. Jasmia told her she was sorry. Then, as Jasmia put it, she went under a couple of times and that was it. Both pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and got 30 years. Tasmia's tentative parole date is June 2026. A winter storm in Plains Township, Pennsylvania had left over 2 feet of snow on the ground on February 1st, 2021. Jeffrey Spade, a 47-year-old engineer, was in his driveway when he started arguing with his neighbors, 50-year-old James Goy and 48-year-old Lisa Goy. The Goys were using a snowblower to clear their parking spots and were throwing snow onto Spade's property. Surveillance cameras from several houses recorded the confrontation. James Goy is seen standing in the middle of the street. He was shouting insults and he also made aggressive gestures. He eventually threw a tool in Spade's direction. Goy then raised his fist. Spade told him to stop. James yelled back that he was going to make Spade's life a living hell and used a homophobic slur. Spade walked right into his garage. He came back out carrying a handgun. He walked straight toward the couple and opened fire at close range. Both James and Lisa were hit and fell into the snow. James Goy was still conscious. He continued to shout at Spade while bleeding on the pavement. Spade walked back into his house. He re-emerged carrying an AR-style rifle. He walked up to the couple, stood over Lisa Goy, and fired twice into her head at point-blank range. He then moved to James. He fired 2 more rounds into his skull. Between 15 and 20 shots were fired during the event. The footage captures Spade walking back into his home. When police units arrived, they heard a final shot from inside the house. Officers found Spade dead in his bedroom. Ronan Kanda was a 16-year-old student who had just finished his GCSEs. On the evening of June 29, 2022, he was walking home through Wolverhampton after buying a PlayStation controller from a friend at around 8 p.m. He had his headphones in and he was looking at his phone. CCTV from the surrounding streets captured him walking casually, completely unaware of anyone behind him. He was just yards from his front door on Mount Road. Earlier that day, 16-year-old Prabjit Bedheza had collected a ninja sword set with a 20-inch blade from a post office using his mother's ID. He'd ordered the weapons online. He and his friend, 16-year-old Sukhman Shagil, had a long-running feud with a friend of Ronan's stemming from a school fight. They spotted Ronan leaving his friend's house and mistook him for their target. CCTV also captured the two of them tracking Ronan through the streets, keeping their distance but closing in as he neared home. Just yards from his front door, Prabjit stabbed him twice with a sword, once in the back and once in the chest, piercing his heart. Ronan collapsed and died on the street. Then they realized they'd attacked the wrong person. Instead of panicking, they just went home, ordered some food and played video games. Ronan's family heard the commotion and found him lying outside their house. His mother, Pooja, later described running out to find her son dying on the pavement. Both were arrested within days. In July 2023, Prabjit and Sukhman were sentenced to life with minimum terms of 18 and 16 years respectively. In the first televised proceedings from Wolverhampton Crown Court, Pooja campaigned for tighter restrictions on online blade sales, and Ronan's law, banning the possession, sale, manufacture, and import of ninja swords, came into force on August 1st, 2025. In September 2017, 19-year-old Kanika Jenkins borrowed her mom's car to go to a party at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois, a tiny suburb near O'Hare Airport. Nearly 40 people packed into a room meant for two, a room that had been booked with a fraudulent credit card obtained through identity theft linked to a local gang. Kanika and her friends got there around 1:13 a.m. Shortly after, she called her older sister. That was the last time her family ever heard her voice. Over the next couple of hours, she drank heavily and posted across Snapchat and Instagram. By 3:15 a.m., her friends were ready to leave, but Kanika could barely stand. She'd forgotten her phone and car keys upstairs, so her friends left her alone by the elevator and went back up to get them. They took her phone and keys, leaving her with no way to call anyone or drive herself home. When they came back down, she was gone. Her mother, Teresa Martin, got to the hotel by 5 a.m., but the staff wouldn't help without a police report, and that report wasn't filed until 1:15 p.m. Police went through the surveillance footage and found her stumbling around through the hotel hallways alone, clearly disoriented, but they never saw her leave the building. At 3:32 a.m., the last footage of Kanika alive showed her entering an unused first-floor kitchen and rounding a corner toward a walk-in freezer. The camera didn't actually capture her going inside. Around 10:30 p.m. that night, a hotel employee walked into the freezer area and didn't see her. It wasn't until midnight On September 10th, roughly 21 hours after she likely entered, that her body was found face down inside the freezer with one shoe off, frozen to death. Her blood alcohol was 0.112, and toxicology found topiramate, an anti-epilepsy drug she was never prescribed. Nobody ever determined where the drug came from. Combined with alcohol, topiramate accelerates hypothermia. The autopsy confirmed all organs were present and in normal positions, debunking the organ harvesting conspiracy theories that exploded online. Teresa filed a $50 million lawsuit against the hotel. They settled for $10 million in December 2023. On May 8, 2020, 16-year-old Louise Smith was reported missing in Hampshire. She'd been training to become a veterinary nurse and suffered from anxiety and depression. About a month earlier, she'd moved in with her aunt CJ Mays and CJ's husband, 30-year-old Shane Mays, in Lee Park. Shane had an IQ of 63 and spent roughly 9 hours a day playing video games. CCTV showed Louise leaving the house that day with Shane, and they walked together toward Haven Thicket. Later that afternoon, Shane appeared on camera alone, buying pizza at a local shop before coming home by himself. 13 days later, Louise's body was found in a clearing in Haven Thicket after a search involving 306 personnel. Her body had been severely burned, arranged like a bonfire with sticks placed around it. Her facial skeleton was, in the court's words, all but destroyed. Dental records were needed to confirm her identity. Forensic evidence showed she'd been sexually violated. Shane was arrested immediately, but denied involvement, saying he'd walked partway to the shops and turned back. But CCTV, phone data, and forensic evidence dismantled every version of his story. He eventually admitted he'd been with Louise longer than he claimed, and pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but the court rejected his account. He was given life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. On the day of the killing, Mays went to Louise's mother's house and looked her in the eyes with, by all accounts, no remorse at all. On September 30th, 2020, the family of 32-year-old Lorraine Cox reported her missing from Exeter, Devon. Lorraine had a fiancé named Elise and had recently returned from Scotland, where she'd been living during lockdown, to visit friends. Except messages were still being sent from her social media accounts. Her family knew something was wrong because the spelling was off, the tone was wrong, and she kept making excuses to avoid video calls. When Elise kept trying to reach her, whoever was controlling the account sent her the middle finger emoji. They were sure someone was using Lorraine's phone. Police reviewed CCTV and found footage of Lorraine walking home in the early hours of September 1st after a night out. Someone was following her. A man trailed her for over a mile through Exeter, then approached and talked her into going back to his room above a kebab shop on Mary Arches Street. The man was Azam Mangori, a 24-year-old failed asylum seeker from Kurdistan who'd been using the alias Christopher Mayer. Inside his flat, he suffocated Lorraine with her own t-shirt. He kept her decomposing body in his bedroom for 8 days, making CCTV-recorded trips to buy bin bags, plastic sheeting, tape, and air fresheners. He used her SIM card to impersonate her on Facebook, texting her family to make them think she was still alive. When she was reported missing, he dismembered her body into 7 pieces, removed a medical tattoo indicating she was diabetic, dumped her limbs in bins behind the kebab shop, and buried her head and torso in woodland near Newton. Her lower left leg and kneecaps were never recovered. When police arrested him, they found a guide on his phone titled How to Dig a Grave by Hand. The investigation spanned over 10,800 hours of CCTV from more than 400 cameras and involved 232 officers. In April 2021, Mangori was sentenced to life with a minimum of 20 years. Rhianne Colson was a 33-year-old mother of 2 from Coventry. The last time anyone saw her alive was on CCTV, leaving St. Mary and Benedict Church around 10 p.m. after visiting a food bank on May 21st, 2025. Her absence wasn't noticed until June 17th, when she didn't contact her twin sister Kirsten on their birthday. That silence was completely out of character. Her family reported her missing, and West Midlands Police assigned over 100 officers to the case. They went through CCTV footage and phone records and gathered more than 50 witness statements. What they pieced together was that around 11:20 p.m. on the night she vanished, 42-year-old Mohammed Durnian, a labourer, picked her up in the Hillfields area of Coventry. Within minutes, A neighbor heard Renee screaming for help and called 999. The recording captured her desperate cries and the sound of a thud as she hit the surface. Officers responded to that 999 call and forced entry into Dernian's flat, which had no electricity and used a bucket for a toilet. They searched the place but didn't find Rianne because Dernian had hidden her body under a duvet and mattress. He told officers his father had cancer and faked a mental health crisis. After police left, satisfied nothing was wrong, he retrieved the body, put it in a suitcase, and drove to Binley Woods on the outskirts of Coventry. There, he buried her in a shallow grave and used petrol to burn parts of the remains. His employer, 39-year-old Adam Moore, helped at the burial site for over an hour. Soil from Moore's sneakers later matched the burial location. On June 27th, police found Rianne's body in the woods. In March 2026, Dernian was acquitted of murder by an 11-1 majority verdict, but convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years. The judge called his claim that she died of a drug overdose a lie and a cynical exploitation. Moore got 6 years for assisting an offender. Just before 7 a.m. on April 30th, 2024, in the quiet neighbourhood of Hainault in East London, 36-year-old Marcus Arduini Monzo, a former Amazon delivery driver, drove a grey van into a pedestrian. Then he stepped out wearing a yellow hoodie and carrying a samurai sword with a 60cm blade. Before the attack, he'd killed and skinned his pet cat. For the next 20 minutes, he ran through the streets, attacking everyone he could find. He broke into a home and attacked a man named Henry de los Rios Polania while he slept in bed next to his partner with their 4-year-old child in the room, shouting, "Do you believe in God?" At around 7:15 a.m., 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin was walking to school in his PE kit with his headphones on. Neighbors tried shouting warnings, but Daniel couldn't hear them. Monzo attacked him from behind, slashing his chest and neck so severely he was nearly decapitated. Daniel died on the street. Monzo kept going, stabbing multiple police officers who tried to intervene. Officers were shouting through the neighborhood for people to lock their doors. He was finally brought down at 7:22 a.m. after being tasered and tackled. The prosecution proves his psychosis was cannabis-induced and self-inflicted rather than an underlying condition like schizophrenia, which meant the murder charge stood. In June 2025, he was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 40 years. On August 10, 2011, a man walked into a Klassiker pharmacy in Chelyabinsk, Russia at 5:30 in the evening. He was wearing a dark baseball cap and a grey sweatshirt with horizontal green stripes, and he was carrying a sawed-off shotgun inside a black plastic bag. 30-year-old Igor Ustinov was standing near the counter when the gunman entered. The shooter didn't demand any money. He raised the weapon and fired a round into Igor. The impact threw Igor to the floor. Customers and staff scrambled for the back room. They huddled together in a corner while the gunman turned around and walked out the front door. Surveillance footage shows the man standing on the pavement just outside the entrance. He spent several seconds calmly reloading the shotgun while people walked by on the street. He then turned around and walked back into the pharmacy. He stepped over the blood on the floor. He asked where someone was. He then looked down at Igor. Igor was still alive and bleeding out on the floor. The gunman pointed the barrel at Igor's head and pulled the trigger. He fired several more times into Igor's skull at point-blank range. The killer didn't take any money, and he didn't even steal any medications. He walked out and disappeared into the city through a nearby archway. Forensic teams found he used the same weapon from a previous murder at a different Klassiker pharmacy in May. In that first attack, he killed a 49-year-old man named Vladimir Shin. Witnesses described the shooter as looking ridiculous and acting uncertain. He spoke in phrases that sounded like stereotypical American soldiers from action movies. He reportedly told witnesses that Igor's death was his own fault. Despite clear CCTV of his face and a reward of 1 million rubles, the pharmacy maniac was never caught, and his identity remains unknown. CCTV from April 8, 2019 in Ashington, Northumberland captured a 35-year-old woman walking calmly down a residential street, carrying a blue bag over her shoulder and a white plastic bag in her hand. The woman was Odessa Carey Jr., and she was on her way to visit a family friend at his allotment shed. Her mother, 73-year-old Odessa Carey Sr., was a cancer survivor. Everyone called her Dessa. Her daughter suffered from Capras delusion, a rare condition where she genuinely believed her real mother had been replaced by an identical imposter. Her brothers had repeatedly warned mental health services. She'd been sectioned in April 2018 after assaulting her mother, but was assessed as low risk and discharged within weeks into homelessness, with no doctor, no benefits, and no medication. On April 6th, Odessa Jr. attacked her mother with a mallet, striking at least 8 blows to the head and face. She left the house, withdrew money, bought cider, then came back and decapitated her mother using knives and scissors. She carved a cross shape into the abdomen and removed the brain in the bathroom. She wrapped the head in a carrier bag and left. That's what was in the blue bag on the CCTV footage. At the allotment shed, she arrived in a pink onesie and odd socks, wiping blood from her hands with baby wipes. She opened the bag, produced her mother's severed head, kissed it on the forehead, and carefully put it back. The man she'd visited, John Murray, didn't have a phone. He later told people at his pub that he'd had a strange day. At her court appearance, when charged with murder, Odessa Jr. answered, quote, "Not my mom, someone else." She was deemed unfit to stand trial and received an indefinite hospital order at Rampton Secure Hospital. On November 25, 2022, 16-year-old Gabriel Rodriguez Castiglione put on a skull mask and a swastika armband and took 2 guns from his father, who was a military police officer. He drove his family's car to the Primo Biti school in Aracruz, Brazil. CCTV recorded him arrive with a license plate covered by a piece of cloth. He used a bolt cutter to break through a side gate and walked straight into the teacher's lounge. He stood in the doorway and opened fire with a semi-automatic pistol. He shot 2 people in that room. He reloaded once while he was standing over the victims. 2 teachers died on the floor, and the 3rd teacher died in the hospital the next day. Castiglione then walked back to his car and drove to the Praia de Coriel school in the same street. This was a private school, and the gates were unlocked. He walked in carrying a revolver. CCTV in the hallway showed him rushing through the corridors with the weapon raised. He fired 8 shots and hit 3 people. One of them was a 12-year-old girl named Selena Zagrillo. He shot her to death in front of her classmates. The footage shows him struggling to reload the revolver before he decided to leave. He drove back to his house and put the guns away. He acted like nothing had happened. He even sat down and ate lunch with his parents, and after that went with them to their beach property after they finished eating. Police identified him from the surveillance footage and tracked him to his home. They arrested him 4 hours after the first shot was fired. He had been planning the attack for 2 years. He killed 4 people and wounded 11 others. The whole attack lasted just 20 minutes. In August 2007, 8-year-old Noreen Jaslin left her house in Kuala Lumpur. She was going to a market in Wangsa Maju to buy a hair clip, and she disappeared immediately after. She was missing for exactly 1 month. On the morning of September 17th, a shop owner in Petalang Jaya found a brand new gym bag left on the pavement. He opened it and found a child's naked body. She was folded into a tight fetal position. Police estimated she had been dead for about 6 hours. The physical changes from the torture were so extensive that Noreen's parents didn't believe the body belonged to their daughter. They noticed the girl in the bag lacked a specific scar from a mandatory tuberculosis vaccination. They thought she might still be alive, and even got prank calls from people claiming to have her. DNA testing eventually proved that it was Noreen. Police later released 2 pieces of CCTV footage. The first clip was recorded at 1 p.m. on September 16th. It showed a man on a motorcycle carrying the gym bag. He dropped it in front of the shop and left. The second clip, from an hour later, showed a woman waiting near the bag. She was eventually picked up by a group of men in a vehicle. The footage was too grainy for local police to use. They sent the tapes to the FBI for digital enhancement. Even with that help, the faces could not be identified. The motorcyclist was never caught, and the case remains unsolved. To this day, Noreen's death is considered the most horrifying crime in Malaysia's recent history. CCTV from a ceramics factory in Jicheng Township, China, captured a 2-minute sequence on February 24, 2019 that remains one of the most disturbing pieces of industrial footage ever recorded. A female forewoman, whose name was never publicly released, was standing in a covered sand storage area, directing a large blue dump truck as it reversed to deliver a load of sand. Behind her, a front-end loader sat idle. Its operator was looking at his phone. As the truck pulled away, the loader lurched forward without warning. The woman was standing directly in the machine's blind spot and never saw it coming. The bucket swept her off her feet and she fell backward into the scoop. The loader then plowed into a mound of sand, filling the bucket and burying her beneath it. Still apparently unaware he'd picked up a person along with the sand, the operator reversed, turned toward a vibrating sand crusher used to pulverize stones into fine particles, raised the bucket, and dumped the entire contents into the machine. For a brief moment, the woman's upper body and arms were visible, protruding from the top of the crusher, flailing. The driver finally saw her, leapt from the cab, and ran to get help. He and a colleague couldn't find a way to reach the top of the machine in time. She disappeared from view. She was confirmed dead that day. 8 days later, authorities listed the cause of death as asphyxiation, though industry experts pointed out that a vibrating sand crusher would cause far worse injuries than suffocation. The footage spread online before being scrubbed from mainland Chinese websites. The operator's phone distraction was identified as a key factor, but no criminal charges or fines were ever publicly reported. CCTV from a small metalworking shop in Neboruzhnya Chelny, Russia, recorded one of the most widely circulated industrial accidents on the internet. On November 19, 2020, a 56-year-old lathe operator was working on a Soviet-era DIP-300 screw-cutting lathe. He was an experienced machinist with over 15 years on the job and the highest qualification grade you can hold in Russia. The workshop was cold, so instead of close-fitting work clothing, he was wearing a heavy quilted winter jacket with long, loose sleeves. The footage shows him leaning over the spinning workpiece, sanding a rotating shaft by hand with sandpaper. Within seconds, the protruding jaws of the lathe's chuck caught the loose sleeve of his jacket. The rotation wrapped the fabric tight and pulled first his arm and then his entire body into the machine. A co-worker from a nearby station ran over and managed to shut the lathe off, but the man had already sustained injuries that killed him instantly. The senior prosecutor for Tatarstan confirmed he'd been pulled in and spun around several times. The lathe was missing its legally required chuck guard, splash shield, and protective screen. There was no accessible emergency stop near the operator's station, and the floor was improvised with wooden pallets rather than a proper work platform. Despite all of this, investigators closed the case without charges, ruling that the worker had received all required safety briefings and the death was the result of his own negligence. And that's the end of the video, folks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and consider supporting me on Patreon. All patrons get early ad-free access to videos, and higher tiers get their name on the screen and a shout out. And also, videos like this one will be on there uncensored because there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to get this video on YouTube without making some edits. So if you want to see the original version of this video, consider checking it out over there. I'd like to give a big thank you to all of my patrons, especially those whose names you're seeing on screen now, particularly The Raven Effect 96, Swollen Fury, Stahlsturm, John Aaron Snow, Psychic Perk, Bohag, Peanut Mama 0725, Vampiric Misfit, Hendrik Fan 5, Sunny Hauser, Bailey Cosmic Black Metal 96, Mimi, Light into Sunlight, KJ Musical, Losanna, Brandon Field, Helen Korn, Kyle, BAN, Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Count Nagula, Edward Howard, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Alex Christmas, Bella Schwartz, Belsi Gell, Stimulate, Inquisitor Zarius, and Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster of WrestleMania X69 or maybe not Dude. Thank you all very much for watching and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.